Energy Secretary Chris Wright says he's reworking past national climate assessments, drawing criticism for rewriting science and walking back climate findings.
You know, this is the counterpart of what's going on at HHS. We have quack science dominating our health organizations in the federal government, and now apparently we have quack science dominating the environmental programs of the federal government. We've already seen that they drew upon fringe scientists who are way out of the mainstream of scientific findings to attempt to overturn the 2009 endangerment finding that the emission of fossil fuels does threaten human life and well-being on this planet. 98% of scientists agree. Look, you could find scientists or other authorities, if you go to the far fringes, to prove anything. You could find, those who claim the earth is flat. Probably even more scientists you could find to claim that than to claim that the burning of fossil fuels has no impact upon human life and human health. Now, it looks like they might be not only undermining the current science, but politically rewriting past findings to conform to their own political views. This is truly horrific. These past national climate assessments were done by the world's leading scientists. They underwent extensive peer review. They were signed off by the national peer review.
You said like by pairs, or
maybe by pairs. Signed off by the National Academy of Sciences. It takes years to produce them to make sure they got it right. Now, the possibility has been opened up that they are going to rewrite science to conform to politics. This is exactly what the dictators of the Soviet Union did once they gained power. You could no longer have independent research, independent science. Whatever you were doing, history, sociology, political science, even hard science, had to conform to the political interests of the regime. And that seems like exactly where we're heading, or have already arrived under the Trump administration. This is the way authoritarians seize and maintain power, through the control of information and ideas. It's backed up, of course, by force, as we've seen with this enormous escalation of immigration customs enforcement, turning it into a unique, extraordinary national police force accountable to no one but Donald Trump, and truly, with no controls over what they are doing. So you see the two sides of authoritarianism, which goes back to Orwell's 1984, where he said, we have the boot in the face and we also have double think, and the two complement one another. And the double think of this administration is as outrageous as anything that the imagination of George Orwell was able to conjure up in his chilling novel 1984.
Dad, Trump wants a new 2030 census that leaves undocumented immigrants off the count, a shift that could reshape representation and funding across America.
Absolutely. An accurate census is essential for the funding of federal programs, which are based upon population, and the population counts are used for the apportionment of congressional seats across the states. That is, the number of congressional seats is proportional to the findings on population of the census. And in turn, that determines also, to a great extent, the number of electoral votes assigned to a state, because the number is equal to 2 senators, which doesn't change, but also the number of congressional seats in the state. You know, he tried to do that in the first term, and he was struck down very narrowly, even by the conservative Supreme Court. Now he's trying to do it again, and it is in direct contradiction. Doesn't bother him, of course, as we saw his rewriting of the 14th Amendment. Direct contradiction to what the census says. Enumeration of the population. It does provide for one exception, non-taxed Indians, who, you know, are considered, you know, part, at least at the time, part of independent nations. It does not provide any other exceptions. This is a rewriting and distortion of the plain meaning of the Constitution and the intent of its framers, which is to count everyone, not to make distinctions among those who reside in the United States. And of course, undocumented immigrants are affected by state and national policies. It's not as if they exist somewhere in some separate universe. They are residents of this country, and like any other residents, they have a stake in the policies being made by federal and state governments. This is another brazenly political attempt to rewrite our Constitution, to distort our Constitution, in direct contradiction to what conservatives have been professing for decades, right, Sam? That they believe in strict construction. You must stick to the plain meaning of the Constitution and the intent of the framers at the time. You can't impose your own views or your own political interests on the Constitution.
What if I want to put my own personal interest in the Constitution?
Well, that would
not
be just
Trump.
fine.
You know, we don't like Trump, but you like me, right?
Yeah, right. Isn't that the point, though? You know, even if you're a Trump supporter, you should be outraged by this, because, you know, the next time there's a Democratic president, you talked, I think, last time about it on the slippery slope. You're right on the slippery slope for a Democratic president to interpret the Constitution according to his or her own values and political interests.
You want to know the honest-to-God truth?
Yeah.
I think if you ask most MAGA folk, they would prefer to just keep Trump as a dictator than have an election where a Democrat could win again. I honestly think that might be true.
That is truly chilling.
I mean,
that means a huge segment of our population is willing to trash our democracy.
I think that's true. You don't think that's true? I don't know. I wonder what the chat thinks.
I think there's quite a high degree of...
You don't watch...
Let me finish.
Oh.
I think there's quite a high degree of likelihood in what you say.
Have you ever heard of Jubilee before? It's a YouTube channel.
No.
It's a YouTube channel where they have these political debates, and they do these things called Surrounded, where it's like one person versus 20 people who think the opposite of them. And they recently had Mehdi Hassan, the journalist, on. So
Yes.
It was Mehdi Hassan versus 20 far-right conservatives. And during that debate, a lot of them seem to show that they don't really believe in democracy. And if they could put into power a right-wing leader, they would keep him there.
Right. Let Trump or some other right-wing leader rule indefinitely.
Yeah.
Become a Putin.
I mean, I'm not saying that's the majority of Americans, but I'm saying it is a good chunk of Trump's base and a good chunk of far-right.
I agree with that. And, you know, there's plenty of evidence in the polling data to that effect as well. You know, a lot of the MAGA people were not disturbed
Yeah.
by Russian interference to undermine our democracy.
Or January 6th.
Yeah.
Or,
as long as it's helping Trump, that's fine.
Right. That's the issue, is like when you use these phrases like, well, it's a slippery slope. If a Democrat comes in next time, they don't even care.
They don't care.
They don't even give a crap.